From artifacts that seem very out of place, to an amazing discovery that suggests alien life visited Earth billions of years ago, here are 10 of the craziest unexplained artifacts in history. Number 10. The Dropa Stones. The Dropa Stones are a real mystery. This peculiar story all started in China, when a Chinese archaeologist found caves that were supposedly being used as makeshift graveyards for the remains of tiny beings that had large, oval-shaped heads. Along with the strange bodies, there were allegedly 716 stone discs found, each lined with bizarre spiral grooves. These discs were sent to a certain professor, who claimed they were actually written characters. He translated them and claimed that the stones told the story of Dropa aliens that crashed their spaceship in the region 12,000 years ago, only to be hunted down and killed by the local people. Obviously, this story is wildly unrealistic. As reported by science website How Stuff Works, it's totally unfounded and there's no actual evidence. The professor who told the story was actually forced to resign due to humiliation. Nobody believed his story. Then, all of a sudden, the stones mysteriously vanished. Still, that doesn't stop people from talking about them. The story of the Dropa Stones continues to circulate through lots of different outlines, being published most recently in 1964 in a UFO magazine. What do you think? Fact or fiction? Speak up in the comments. Number 9. The London Hammer. The London Hammer wasn't actually discovered in England, but that's not even the strangest part. It was actually found in London, Texas, way back in 1936 by a man named Max Hahn and his wife as they were out walking. The hammer soon became known as the London artifact, as it was allegedly found encased in a piece of rock 400 million years old. The obvious question here is, how could a tool made by humans have been trapped inside of a rock that was so old? It's pretty obvious to most scientists that mankind has only been around and using tools for a minimum of 200,000 years. As you can imagine, this debacle absolutely boggled researchers around the world. Even stranger is that the hammer has apparently not rusted since it was discovered almost 100 years ago. The tool looks like something that would have been used in the late 1800s, and so there's no way it could have been found inside such ancient rock. It's just impossible. But even more impossible are the theories surrounding it. While some people claim the hammer somehow got lost in time, the real story probably isn't that interesting. It's more likely that the minerals that surrounded the hammer formed a concretion, basically growing around the hammer to make it appear as though it were fossilized inside of it. But then again, nobody knows the exact truth of the mysterious London hammer. It's currently on display at the Carl Bowes Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. It certainly does make one question exactly what kind of phenomenon put it in that ancient rock, and how long it had really been there. Number 8. Bathtub of Tsar Alexander I. The Babolovo Palace is an impressive and eye-opening historical location near the Russian city of St. Petersburg. The palace was built near the end of the 18th century during the reign of Catherine the Great. And while the palace itself is quite amazing, so are the artifacts that were discovered inside. One of the strangest artifacts uncovered was a giant bathtub, known as the Tsar bath, which was added to the palace a few decades after its original construction. Nobody is entirely sure what the tub was used for, though we do know that it was built from a massive chunk of granite taken from one of the islands of Finland. The tub at one point weighed over 160 tons, and it took an entire team of masons to carve it into the royal bathtub. Apparently, it took at least 10 years to finish the job. The tub is almost 6 feet tall, 1.9 meters, and about 15 feet wide, 4.8 meters, with thick granite walls 20 inches, 45 centimeters thick. It could hold a full 8,000 buckets of water. While there's a bit of mystery surrounding the tub, it's likely that it was just used as a glamorous bathtub for royalty. Imagine a wealthy man sitting in his hot tub smoking cigars, but this one was for the Emperor of Russia to enjoy while pondering their next move. What would you do if you had that kind of extreme bathtub? It's closer to a hot tub than a bathtub, but it would make bathing a truly remarkable experience. I'd probably take hour-long baths personally. Let me know what you'd do in the comments section below. And while you're at it, feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. You're going to love the rest of the new videos that are in store. Number 7. The Saqqara Bird. The Saqqara Bird could be evidence that the ancient Egyptians knew how to fly. An archaeological expedition found an incredible bird-shaped object inside an Egyptian tomb that dates back all the way to 200 BC. There's no denying this artifact looks exactly like either a bird or an airplane. It's made out of sycamore maple wood and is currently exhibited in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. It's one of the most controversial Egyptian findings ever, even though it does look a lot like a hawk, which would relate to the Egyptian god of the sun, Horus. Many people are claiming that it's actually designed to look like an airplane. Some Egyptologists believe this is no ordinary statue, but actually a representation of human flight. It could have been an early model for an airplane, or a type of glider that used wings to fly through the air. Unfortunately, we're currently unable to go 2,000 years into the past and ask what the motivation was for creating such an item. Is it a bird or a plane? We may never know. Number 6. The Piri Rice Map. The Piri Rice Map is one of the most confusing artifacts ever discovered. As reported by the Vintage News, a German theologian who was working in Istanbul back in 1929 at the Topkapi Palace Library found a curious parchment made from gazelle skin in a stack of discarded items while cataloging antiques. The parchment had a map drawn on it, and the German researcher was amazed to find that on the map was an outline of both South America and Antarctica. He rescued the parchment, and it has since been studied quite a bit by many different scientists. The story of the map goes back to 1513. It was drawn and signed by a Turkish cartographer who had also served in the Navy as an admiral. For him to make the Piri Rice Map, he used several different sources, including Portuguese maps, a map drawn by Christopher Columbus, and an Arabic map. But that still doesn't explain how the map shows Antarctica 300 years before it was discovered. He could have used all the inspiration in the world, but he couldn't have predicted the continent of Antarctica. Even stranger is that Antarctica is shown on the map as a landmass, which it was tens of millions of years prior to the map being drawn, during a warm period before Antarctica was covered in ice. This is obviously a huge controversy, as nobody understands how this man could have figured out all these different lands in the 1500s. Nobody had even discovered them yet. And even stranger was that he used a method to draw the map that hadn't even been invented yet. He drew the map in 1513 using the Mercator projection, but that method wasn't developed until 1569 by Gerardus Mercator. Basically, this map could somehow be evidence of an early civilization that mastered the world's oceans many years ago. Many scientists doubt it, and say that he simply guessed and got lucky when drawing his map. But the truth is, nobody knows for sure. Number 5. The Great Wall of Texas. The Great Wall of Texas is a highly debated artifact. Sitting beneath the city of Rockwall is a row of hard mineral stones that look an awful lot like a wall. It's been the subject of debate for over 160 years, as specialists argue whether it's a rock wall built by an ancient civilization, something left behind by aliens, or a naturally occurring phenomenon. The wall has been documented in about 11 different locations surrounding the city of Rockwall, but nobody knows exactly what its purpose was. The wall was first found by accident when a farmer was trying to plow their field many years ago. Since then, geologists from the University of Texas have studied samples of the rock, and they believe it's simply a deposit of sedimentary material that dried and hardened over several million years. They say that this explains why it's formed in such a distinctive pattern. But then there is the problem of what appear to be steps and archways. It looks like the walls were once part of some kind of ancient city that got buried beneath the soil eons ago. Are the geologists lying to us, or are they mistaken? It really makes you wonder. Number 4. Ancient Earthquake Detector. It's sometimes hard for us to believe that our ancient ancestors could develop complex technology, but they definitely could. A modern seismograph may be an extremely sensitive piece of equipment, recording the slightest movements beneath our feet. But that doesn't mean ancient humans were too stupid to make one out of the materials they had handy. And this is where the ancient earthquake detector came from. It was created around 2,000 years ago before people even knew what an earthquake was. According to Engadget, the story goes way back to Imperial China. It's said that a scholar named Zhang Heng, who dabbled in astronomy and mathematics, invented the first seismoscope. He introduced the device to the imperial court back in AD 132, but his fellow members of the court all thought he was crazy. And while there are no surviving artifacts, they are documented clearly in history. The instrument was a large bronze mechanism that looked a lot like a decorative urn. On the outside of the urn were 8 dragons, each one with a bronze ball inside its jaws. Underneath the dragons were 8 bronze toads with their mouths open to catch the balls if they fell. Basically, this weird instrument worked because the dragons would drop their balls in the case of shock waves from an earthquake. Depending upon which of the 8 dragons dropped its ball into the toad's mouth, the scientists would know which way the earthquake came from, or which way it was coming from. But the mystery here is that many historians don't believe this piece of technology ever existed. How could such a basic instrument detect seismic activity? It's simply unthinkable. Could there be more to this device than we know? Number 3. The Viking Sword. The Ulfbat sword was the ultimate weapon of the Viking warrior. it was also 1,000 years ahead of its time. Roughly 170 of these swords have been found so far, all of them dating between 800 and 1000 AD. But what makes these Viking weapons so interesting is that the technology required to have forged them came from the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s and 1900s. It's simply boggling how such impressive swords were created in an age where the people were not using our modern tools to forge swords. The Vintage News reported that the iron used to forge the swords would have needed to be heated to around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The iron would have then been liquefied and the impurities removed, then mixed with carbon to strengthen the iron to make the ultimate blade. But medieval technologies weren't even capable of doing anything close to that. They would have had to use a hammer to remove impurities. Not to mention, they wouldn't have been able to heat the iron to such a ridiculous temperature. Another question is why these swords were only made during a 200-year period. It doesn't make any sense. A professional modern blacksmith even tried to recreate the Ulfberht sword using medieval technology, and while he did come close, he still couldn't replicate the exact same thing. The Vikings obviously must have been master blacksmiths, possibly even the best the world has ever seen. That is, unless they found their skills through some kind of paranormal or extraterrestrial means. Number 2. The Clerksdorp Spheres. The Clerksdorp Spheres are probably the most controversial artifacts on this list. They were found originally in the mines of South Africa several decades ago. According to researchers of prehistoric culture, the spheres are evidence that intelligent life did indeed exist on Earth long before we think it did. A researcher named Michael Cremo has traveled the world gathering information on strange artifacts, including these mysterious spheres, and he's compiled all the information in his book titled Forbidden Archaeology: The Hidden Truth of the Human Race. In it, he claims that the spheres are at least 2.8 billion years old, and that they're so hard they cannot be scratched even by steel. While most mainstream scientists believe the ancient spheres were simply formed by a natural process of concretion, just like the Bosnian spheres and many other weird stone orbs that have been found around the world, some say they were hand-carved by intelligent beings. This is because one of the spheres was apparently tested at the California Space Institute, and scientists there found that it was so perfectly balanced that it exceeded the limit of their measuring technology. That means the sphere is an absolute perfect circle. But if people really did inhabit the Earth 2.8 billion years ago, what were they doing just hanging around making spheres? And why is it that only the spheres survived their society? Could this be an elaborate hoax? Could they have crashed here on Earth billions of years ago? We need more research to figure out the truth. Number 1. COSO artifact. Sometimes there's nothing you can do to dissuade the true believers. A perfect example is the COSO artifact. It was originally discovered in 1961 by 3 amateur rock hunters who were hunting for geodes in California. One of the geodes that they found and took home turned out to hold something a little strange inside of it. According to Smithsonian Magazine, these stone hunters thought they had found a spark plug trapped inside the geode that was 500,000 years old. As always, the conspiracy lovers jumped on the story and claimed that the artifact was proof of an ancient human history, a time in which humans used modern technology and a time when we should have been in the middle of evolving from apes into men. If it were true, it would basically destroy everything we know about evolution. But it's definitely not true. This strange artifact was apparently lost sometime in the 60s, and in 1999, a group of skeptics took copies of the images and x-rays to some professional spark plug collectors. The collectors then claimed the artifact was simply a spark plug from the 1920s, with some of the metal rusted away. It wasn't even a geode, it was just a normal spark plug found in a bit of rock. What a disappointment, but at least the theory of evolution remains intact. What are your theories of these amazing artifacts? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. See you soon!